Today we are going to talk about research design. So far, whatever we have discussed in this course regarding sociological aspects of media, research is one of the final outcomes that we can think about. So media research is something that we do around media, different media platforms, try to understand how different contents that has been created in media, how they work, they function, what are the kind of impacts they have on the society, so on and so forth. So we'll try to understand the media design and see what is a research. So to begin with, research can be understood as a systematic approach to knowledge to validate and add on to the existing knowledge system. When I say existing knowledge system, I mean that every research should take into consideration the fact that no research, no work is done in void or in emptiness and is not being done in itself as if for the first time. Everything we do, we study, is a part of an existing knowledge system. And every new research is either adding to it or testing it or trying to understand certain existing phenomenon or new phenomenon using some existing parameters, theoretical backgrounds, theoretical templates, so on and so forth. So, for any research, it is important to understand that we are not doing the research just out of personal curiosity. We are also adding to existing knowledge system, and a research has to be very systematic. Then only a research, the final outcome of a research, can be validated, can be approved, and can be considered as a serious objective work of research. The purpose of doing a research is definitely knowledge production, so that we can understand every new phenomenon, our new times, every new things that are happening, as well as the old thing. Even writing history is a part of research. Doing archival work is a part of research. So the purpose is knowledge production on the basis of, again, I repeat, existing knowledge pool of each and every discipline. That is, we are doing our research in media. Media itself has its own knowledge pool. Our seniors, senior faculties, senior academicians, scholars have worked on it. We have to base our works on them, try to locate our works in respect and in corresponding to their works, try to understand whether an existing work that already is there, whether that makes sense to us anymore. If it does, we might have to test it. If it doesn't, we might have to test it to prove otherwise. So this is a serious scientific method, and by scientific I mean step by step following certain methods can we only reach at the final moment, that is the final research outcome, in the form of a dissertation, in the form of an essay, in the form of a journal writing, in the form of even video essays. Before beginning into what is research, I must identify and actually at least help you identify what is not a research. Why? Because most of the times what we do is we identify certain methods of research to be the holistic research itself. That is not the case. For example, accidental discovery. Accidental discovery happens for scientific research. It may even happen for humanities, social science as well. But accidental discovery only cannot be considered as research, because that discovery also needs to be tested to be considered as a valued source of knowledge. Data collection. One of the major steps that any researcher follows while doing their own research. But data collection as a whole or in itself is not just a research. It's one of the tools, one of the methods. Now, doing literature survey, finding out books, existing books, old books, as I was saying, it is a part of a research knowledge pool, knowledge system. That means existing work are there. But only finding it out is also not a research. Then what is research? It is a combination of all these things. A research is data collection, research is interview, it is also accidental discovery if we make such discoveries. It is also going through the literature and everything. Actually, all these things together, depending on what kind of a research we are doing, all these things together forms a research question or forms the research. Now, why do we do research? Why are we interested in research? We do research for certain purposes. Now, that purposes may be triggered by area of interest, that I like this area, these are the things I have studied, so I like this area, I want to do some research on the basis of this. Research has some purposes in the society, not only just my personal need or curiosity. We do research to make informed decisions or informed choices or informed understanding of a topic or a subject. So I may have a general understanding of a thing, but doing a research will give me more informed and elaborate idea about research or about that topic. We also do research to take a career in research. We may want to do our PhDs, MPhil, research work with funding, with public bodies, with private bodies, different research agencies, so on and so forth. We might also want to be a researcher by profession. That is another reason for doing research. Another reason is to evaluate social conditions, cultural conditions, literary works, to understand literary texts, media, like for example, media is our case, to understand media phenomenon, their impact on on society, culture, etc. To understand all these different phenomenons, events, so on and so forth, we do research. We also conduct research or try to evaluate a situation, do a research for an NGO or for some government bodies who are there to do intervene into policy making. For example, the government wants to see what's the scenario of girl child's education in India. That requires a research. So what government does is, through its different bodies, along with other NGOs and other stakeholders, they create a research team. And those research team also outsource certain jobs to individual researchers, independent researchers, further other research agencies and bodies. So that kind of work is also a good research work. We also, as I was saying, that personal interest is not just research, but that is also very important. We cannot do a research if we are not interested in that area. So what we study, what we like, the films we watch, the television shows we see, the advertisements we understand, marketing, economics, etc. We also do our research based on our personal interest areas. That these are the things I have studied, this is the area that I want to work upon. And most importantly, as I was saying, only interest doesn't help. So to validate that interest, because I may be interested in so many things, but that interest needs to be validated through proper research. So whatever I feel, my opinion and everything is, to make an objective, proper understanding of that phenomenon, I need to do a research. So now if we have to talk about what media research is, it is a study of the effects of the different mass media in the society. How the mass media function, what are the impacts of mass media in society, all these things are a part of media research. The media research questions can range from, for example, how young girls in India respond to fairness cream, to the relationship between internet, new media and fake news. So all these things come under the purview of what we understand as media research. Media research take into consideration what people read, watch, listen on various different platforms in terms of media, radio, television, internet, cinema, so on and so forth, magazines, etc. Media research also help to understand the ways media can aid population of a society in decision making. That there is a burning debate in the society. A media researcher would like to see whether existing media has any function, can help, can give an insight or do anything to create the opinion. Or on the other hand, it can even be the other way around, that because of the media, is certain opinion being formed which shouldn't be the case. So all these things are also under the purview of media research, public debates, concerns, so on and so forth. Once a researcher finalizes their research question, media research question, they follow a theoretical framework, like what kind of a work you want to do. Okay, I want to see the women's education in India, and I want to see what is the impact. Where have we reached? So the kind of theoretical frameworks that I might take is definitely a feminist theoretical framework, as well as the idea of education, women's education, development of nation, so on and so forth. And if I want to add the perspective of media into it, how media is helping. So maybe I want to see the different media press releases, different advertisements that have happened, propaganda that media did, all these things. So different frameworks, theoretical frameworks together help us to do a complete research. Then also, once the research question is ready, one needs to formulate their research methods, like what are the methods that need to be employed. Contemporary research methods are greatly varied. Different forms of methods are used, can range from analyzing old newspapers to performing controlled experiments, in the sense having a group discussion, social experiment, etc. All these things the scholars are employing these days to do their media research. Now we'll move on to the key concepts and issues in research in humanities as well as in media. First, time. How much time do we need? One has to be practical about it. One has to understand this properly and has to create a timeline. Now, this timeline needs to be prepared keeping in mind how much time do I need to finalize my literatures that I'm going to study. How much time do I need for the literature survey to study all the materials? How much time do I need for field work, for example? The field work includes surveys, includes interviews, so on and so forth. And we have to understand that the moment we are outside of our lab or outside of our rooms or outside of our office, once we are in the field, the problem is there can be a lot of other factors that may cause delay. Maybe you wanted to interview some person, you finalized a date, that date gets delayed by 2 weeks. Maybe you decided for a group discussion with 50 people, only 30 are ready on that particular day. You go to a particular shelter home or a prison or somewhere where a group of people need to be interviewed. For example, there is an outbreak of a disease or something, you are not allowed there for more than 2 months. You thought that there are 100 people in a village, but turns out due to migration, there are only 30 people left. Then you have to completely change your village and think about any other village. So time is very important. So gauging all these things together, there has to be a proper estimated time. Every research, be it for government, for NGOs, for media houses, media researches for institutions such as universities, colleges, MPhil, PhD, undergraduate dissertation, everything, it has a timeline. Say, for example, for graduation, you may get 6 months. For masters, you may get 6 months. For MPhil, you get 1 year for writing. PhD, you get up to 5 years to 7 years for writing. Now, your research has to be of that kind that can be finished in that time. So once we chew more than we can digest, what happens is we spill over and we cannot finish it on time. So time is very, very valuable for a research. Then comes the variables, different variables. For example, if we are trying to see representation of women on screen, then there are a lot of multiple variables that are work. Age group, which age group, urban or rural, what kind of advertisements, print or media, audiovisual. If it's audiovisual, then what kind of a platform? Where do they see it? What is the age group? So on and so forth. So these variables needs to be properly spelled out before doing a research. Otherwise, what happens is the research becomes very limited, because what we do is we work with our preconceived notions and apply it for the whole of the population. But we have to understand population is always heterogeneous. So it is always better to keep the variables ready, be aware of the variables so that you can do the research accordingly, and you can definitely argue that what is your position, what kind of a population you are dealing with, what kind of a people you are dealing with, what kind of media you are dealing with, so on and so forth. Then comes the next step, hypothesis. Once you select your topic, you know, you are aware of your time, the time and the duration that you need. You also are aware of the variables and everything. We also need something called a hypothesis. Hypothesis is a projected outcome, that what may what we may get by the end of this thesis, the research. One may or may not get the exact outcome after doing the research, and that is the purpose of a research, that the hypothesis may be denied as well. Then comes in types of data, what kind of data you will be using, whether it will be quantitative or qualitative, what kind of a research methods you follow. Do you have to deal with a lot of data? That means you are doing survey, you are gathering data, or it is just content analysis based. Depending on that, you have to also kind of understand what kind of data you are dealing with, or at all whether you are dealing with some data. Then comes in the next is the structure of research, that before writing or preparing the report, we have to also structure the research, that how to begin, how to do it, how to go about it, what to do next, what are my next steps, so on and so forth. Then comes the method of deduction and everything, because while structuring, you are keeping in mind where to keep the interviews, what to write in the introduction, what comes next, the chapter division, so on and so forth. If it is a written thesis-like outcome, if it is a report for any agency, for media houses, etc., then also that there are certain things that are expected out of this research. That way you will also have to do the structuring and everything. And once that is done, the deduction is important. What have you found from your survey? Say, for example, you have 100 people, your population, your sample size, and you have spoken with 100 people, and you have gathered a data. 100 people have answered same questions. That means that answers, that is 100 different answers, needs to be evaluated and then deduced, in the sense what the possible outcome in terms of majority, what majority thinks, to what the opinion, the different kinds of opinion that one may get, or the idea of opinion that one may have from different these answers. These deductions need to be made. Sometimes in the form of summary, sometimes analyzing some of the unique answers and everything. We write and summarize these answers. And finally, while structuring from the interviews, from data analysis, from content analysis, we have to deduce what we are getting logically. Finally, one thing that is very important that we have to keep in mind is the question of ethics. Ethics is very important. Ethics, one thing first, no plagiarizing. That is, not copying without giving proper acknowledgement. That is big no-no. Another thing that is most important in terms of ethics is that while doing media research, we employ a lot of social studies methods, anthropology methods for our research. We do group discussions, we talk to marginalized people, we talk to many people, we do our surveys on people who are vulnerable, who are always threatened by natural calamities. They could be victims, they could be a whole lot of diverse population we may have to deal with. It is important to maintain an ethical position. One example that we can give is that every time a researcher goes to a vulnerable village, say for example a village where you are going to do research on migration. So you go, and this is a migration where due to unemployment and everything. So you go and talk to them. The first thing they want to know that, Didi, you are coming to our place to do research. Many people do come from many NGOs and everything. Our girls go away to earn money, to work in other cities. What will we get if we talk to you? It is very tempting to tell them that if you talk to me, we will help you out. But will we? These kind of sensitization training is very much needed for the researcher. For media research, social science-centric research, research in humanities, everything, we have to be very, very careful while answering, while taking a position while doing our research. We cannot be unethical. We cannot exploit our respondents. We cannot exploit the situation, so on and so forth. So being ethical, apart from not copying from others' work, being ethical also means being respectful and also responsible as a researcher. We should know how much we can talk, how much we can promise, Because many a times it happens that we talk to a focus group and they might ask that if I talk to you, will there be any change? Maybe they are worried about, say, for example, the impact of fake news. They are very much worried. But suddenly they might ask the researcher that why will I talk to you? Will it change if I talk to you? We have to think over and again, what do we answer? Do we say yes? Are we in a position to say yes? We are just doing a research. We cannot say yes. We have to be careful there. So that is the question of ethics. And finally comes in the question of validity. That means if all my steps are proper, if I have taken an objective viewpoint, if I am not too much biased, if I haven't been a corrupt practitioner of research and everything, my research process and methods are properly done and structured, then my research can be validated. And that needs to be properly spelled out in your thesis or in your report, that these are the methods I have followed, so that whoever is evaluating your research can cross-check with the methods and see whether you have done a proper job or not. Now, when we do a research and if we do fieldwork, only if, there are certain things that we have to keep in mind. As I was saying, fieldwork, data collection is not just fieldwork, and data collection is not research, but sometimes that is very important. And for media research, a lot of times this needs to be employed, the fieldwork. Now, I will give you some keywords and some key ideas around this data collection and fieldwork that one may do. One is, basic important thing is the sampling. We have to do a sampling. What is sampling? Sampling is the process of selecting units, that is people, organization, etc., from a population of interest, so that by studying the sample, we may fairly generalize our results back to the population from which they were chosen. That means when we do a fieldwork for our research, for example, you want to talk to the youth of Kolkata about the impact of fake news in society. Then you have to first decide certain variables, and then you have to decide what do you mean by youth of Kolkata. That means we have to understand that which age group. Does that mean minors, that is schoolgoers, or do we mean just young adults like college goers? What kind of colleges? Private college, public college, because depending on that, the economic background will also be reflected. And then you decide on a population, which is very heterogeneous in nature. And you want to talk to them. Either you want to conduct a survey or you want to do a group discussion or something like that. Now, when you decide on your population, turns out this is like 10,000 people. So you cannot talk to 10,000 young adults. So what you do is you need to decide on a sample. So there are different methods through which you do the sampling, and you select representative few from that 10,000, and you gather your data from there. And that needs to also maintain the heterogeneous nature of the population. And then your reading and finding can be applied to that 10,000 and said, okay, this is what 10,000 people think. However, I am only talking to 100 perhaps. So that is sampling. And for media research, very often we have to do that. There are some other key terms that we have to understand for doing this kind of field work. One, as I said, is population. So it is the group you wish to generalize. This is the group you would like to sample, like, for example, the 10,000 young adult people. But even in that population, there are two categories. One thing is theoretical population. The other is accessible population. So you would want to talk about what 10,000 people think. But accessibility-wise, 10,000 may not be the accessible one. In the sense, you have an idea about 10,000 people by following what? By following, for example, the college registers. So the college registers all together, all the different colleges and everything that you have decided to work with, you collect the data of their students from the office, individual offices of these colleges. And you realize that there are 10,000 people, that is your population. But accessibility-wise, it may turn out that 10% of that 10,000 is not accessible at all. Some of them may have dropped. Some of they may not attend their classes. Some of them may again have dropped and come back much later, and etc. So there can be a lot of reasons that some people are not accessible to us. Rest is our accessible population. Next keyword that we shall keep in mind is sampling frame. The listing of the accessible population from which one draws the sample is the sampling frame. If one is doing a phone survey, the telephone book is the sampling frame. The college goers, the college registers is your sample frame. So you follow that. Then the final, at least for today's class, one of the last key terms that I'm giving you is the idea of the bias. Every research has a bias. We have to keep in mind that my research may be subjected to bias. But what we can do is we can work towards minimalizing it instead of increasing it. So even if the perfect population of interest is identified, the researcher may not have access to all of them. Like I said, theoretical population, accessible population. You may not have access to all the people in the community. And even if she does, she may not have a complete and accurate understanding or sampling frame from which to select. Maybe the register that you are following is outdated, doesn't have all the required data and everything. Some college may have a brilliant data keeping. Some college may not have that infrastructure at all. In such cases, bias happen in the sense that you shift a bit from your sample frame and you try to figure out some other ways, which is otherwise is not very objective. In such cases, these are the instances where bias may be included. Then let me just now summarize that how the different stage of this sampling actually function. Like I was saying, for a research, there are certain key concepts like time, from time to validity. Even for doing field research, there are certain stages that we have to keep in mind. So, stages in selecting a sample for a media research. Define your target population. So, if our topic is, for example, impact of fake news and what the youth of today feel, that we are thinking about college students. So finally, I have defined my target population. Then select a sampling frame. From where the sampling frame means from where do you access? In the sense, this may be the individual college registers. That would be one of the initial entry points. Next step is determine if a probability or non-probability sampling method will be chosen. There are two types of sampling that we use. One is very quantitative and one is a little qualitative and quantitative. These are on the basis of which, what kind of a survey, what kind of a questionnaire, everything that you need. On the basis of that, we decide what kind of a sampling method we will choose. If it is very data-based, etc., then it could be one method. But in social sciences, we do not work with quantitative things much. We work in a combination of quantitative as well as qualitative thing. Even for media research, in social science, in any kind of humanities work. Then plan procedure for selecting sampling units. That how will you identify and how will you, figure out, because you have 10,000 people. Then how do you decide on your selected 100 people? That is where the probability, non-probability comes in. Then determine the sample size. That is it the 10% of the overall population? That means is it 100 or is it 5%? That's up to you. Then select an actual sample unit. That, okay, this is my final unit, and how you do it? By employing the sampling method, you decide, you select the people from the population, and then you conduct your field work. You work with only those people, not the overall population. So, as I was saying, that there are two types of sampling, probability and non-probability. Probability sampling generally is very data-based. And the kind of answers also are very quantitative in nature. So probability sampling is that it is mostly randomly selected, not much variables are added. And the moment much variables are added, that means you also want different voices, where a little quantitative things also comes in. So probability sampling is mostly random. More specifically, each sample from a population of interest has a known probability of being selected. That means anybody can be selected. Everybody has equal chance of being selected. There are 4 types of probability sampling: simple random, stratified random sampling, systematic sampling, and cluster. Non-probability sampling is where comes in different variables. So, for example, in a community, there are 3 Muslims, there are 5 Hindus, there are 2 Christians, 1 Jain, and something of that sort. So, in different nature. That means there is already an equation if you are trying to do any studies on the basis of religious representation, for example, in an office or in a college or school or anything, already you can see that if you only work with probability sampling, the problem is that there everybody has the equal chance of being represented. But that you cannot do once you determine the variables. That means that because religion-wise, representation becomes lesser or more, can be majority or minority, accordingly the sample size should also be chosen. It cannot be just simply randomly chosen. What happens then is the lesser representative, that is the minority group, have lesser chance of being represented. Which is why non-probability sampling is used, so that everybody has a chance depending on the variables and the kind of things you want to address. So non-probability method is more for tougher situations where there are more variables, the sampling unit is missing, something of that. So there are 4 types of non-probability sampling: convenience sampling, availability sampling also, we also call it availability sampling, purposive sampling, quota sampling, and snowball sampling. Now, this is where I would like to end today. Before that, one final thing. What should be our sample size in case we are going for a field research? It depends on your study, also on your population. How big is your population? Rule of thumb is that the sample size should be larger than 30 and less than 500. That means 30% of the population should be maintained. If you maintain the 30% of your population, then it's more or less a safe sample size. Thank you.